I'm going to introduce you guys and let's just delve in. So, we're going to go from East Coast to West Coast. Andy Alador, Andy, you are a fabulous writer, guitar instructor, musician. You wrote this great book that I loved with
Oh, cool.
Alan Paul that I'm holding up so people can see. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it and how great it was. Uh,
That's
so,
awesome.
so thanks for that. And then I want to be able to thank. Hang on, it's telling me I have to do all these steps. Let's do
See
this,
a lot of
people.
buttons. Meeting is now streaming live on Facebook, it says.
Well, I hope it is because
And it's recording
yeah, because I'm going to
and
do the audio.
and it's also doing an MRI of all of us.
That's
That's
right.
pretty
I'm going to
tough.
give you guys a complete checkup when we're done. We'll see how you all are doing.
It's like the X-ray specs.
That's right. So, Andy, thank you for joining us from Long Island. You're going to talk to us a little bit about your day at 5150. You lucky bastard.
That was an insane day, and it's really all I have.
Okay, we'll get to that. And then next, Brad Nye is joining us from Chicago. And Brad was on the 1984 tour, which was the first time I saw Van Halen. Blew my mind. Was amazing. And he was on that tour and actually worked with Harry Shaps and Eddie Anderson. So, Brad, thanks so much for joining us here from Chicago.
Yeah,
And
great
then
to be with you.
last but not least, this guy is awesome, fellas. He plays a mean guitar. Usually, when
He
people
does.
put a thing up about they're going to play a Van Halen tune, I'm kind of like, nah, we'll see. But this dude can do it.
Yeah.
So from
And
the
that's
van,
and that's such an oversized guitar. That's going to make it way harder to
Yeah,
play.
let me get that
How do you
down.
get? I mean, like,
Okay.
oh.
so Caleb, thank you so much from Southern Caleb Rappaport from Nerd
Yep.
Halen.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well,
Awesome.
obviously, fellas, this has been a heavy couple of weeks. I think anybody that paid attention to Van Halen kind of knew this day was going to come. We'd all heard that Eddie was not doing well, but you always have hope at some point that he'll pull through. And I know he fought it for a very long time. And
Right.
certainly my father battled lung cancer and it was miserable. And, it's a horrible time. So first of all, just if anybody in the Van Halen family or friends or stuff, we certainly send our condolences out. But today's about the love of the music and all the great memories and time. So let's start with you. Let's hear all about Andy, all about your time at 5150 back when you were with Guitar World, right?
Yeah, and you guys may recall. Um, do either of you guys? I know James. I think you do. Remember the Guitar World cover that was Billy Corgan and Eddie together,
Yep.
which was in '96.
Mm-hmm.
In my memory, it was always longer ago than that, but I mean not a lot longer ago. For whatever reason, I thought it was '94 or '5, but unless it was in '95 and then we ran it in like January '96, I don't know. I can't. It's whatever. And but the way that happened was I was doing a lot of stuff with Billy Corgan at the time, who the Pumpkins were like, I mean, they had just released Melancholy and it went 16 times platinum, and they were really one of the biggest bands, if not the biggest band in the world right at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd gotten to know Billy well, and I went out to his house in Chicago a few times, and he lived in Lincoln Park back in those days. And anyhow, he asked Guitar World one day out of the blue. He said, "Hey, you know, I would love to meet and interview Eddie Van Halen. He's like my biggest hero." And people wouldn't necessarily think Eddie Van Halen and Billy Corgan Smashing Pumpkins in the same sentence. But the song 1979, he said, was partially inspired by Van Halen only because he had these really nostalgic feelings about that year, and like in the summer going to pool parties and Dancing in the Street would be playing, or like a Van Halen song would be on all the time. And to him it was like represented what he tried to capture in that song, which was, it's a beautiful song. It's a very nostalgic song. You wouldn't know from listening to it that Van Halen had anything to do with that, but for him it did. So anyhow, Brad Tolinski was editor in chief of Guitar World at the time, and had been doing a lot of stuff. You know, Eddie had a close relationship with Guitar World, was always great, um, and had given us a lot of time. And Matt Bruck, we had, you know, gotten to know Matt Bruck really well, and Matt went from being a tech to becoming Eddie's manager pretty much. I mean, unless I'm wrong about that. That's my understanding of it. Um,
Partner. Yeah.
and so Matt was always like the go-to guy for years. You know, he would always make it happen, and so it turned out Eddie dug Smashing Pumpkins too. You know, he thought they were a great band. He was into having Billy come over, so Guitar World facilitated it. And Brad and I flew out to LA, and the next morning we all convened at Eddie's house on Coldwater Canyon.
Mhm.
And, you know, it was kind of a crazy, little bit of an out of body thing. I can't remember. I wish I could remember if it was when we first got there or when we left. But I have this vivid memory of Eddie at the end of his driveway, either saying hello or saying goodbye. I can't remember which one it was. But he was very nice. He was really warm. He gave everybody a big hug, and so we were there for hours. I mean, like 4 hours. And aside from the interview conversation that was about 3 hours long, then they did photos, a photo session, and all of that was at 5150 in the studio. So, you know, we spent time in there, and he showed us the whole complex with the different rooms. And primarily we were in the control room, but we did go in the room, the studio area, so where Eddie had his 412 cabinet. There was tape on the floor for the angle that he always wanted the cabinet to be at. And there was a microphone that was, you know, never moved, I
Right.
guess. And everything was just so. I can tell you that as you walk through, have either of you guys been to 5150, by the way?
No,
Uh,
I wouldn't.
Okay.
only as a stalker, but yeah, no.
Okay. All right. I just have,
You're that guy. We
I
know
just
you're
have
that
to ask
guy.
one of thousands. Yes.
because maybe you'd know what I meant. That's the
I
only
know the
reason
layout. I know the layout, but I've never been like on the property. But I've you know, I know the whole topography of it and all that. So stalker.
They
Go
have
ahead.
surveillance. They have surveillance footage of you, but other
Oh,
than
I'm
that,
sure.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure they do.
you know,
Facial recognition.
you got your drones. But yeah, you go in, and then, you know, there's Eddie's amp, and if you walk a little further down, you know, it wasn't really like the next room, but it was a bit down where Alex's drums. And I am not joking. You could barely see the drums. There were so many mic stands. Like, it was just this lattice work of, I mean, there were like 80 microphones on his drums. Like, it was kind of ridiculous. You know, there would be like a microphone with a microphone on the microphone, and then another microphone under
Right.
that microphone.
Chase
And
and
so-
tone.
So Alex was standing there, and because I'm from New York, you know, that's what I'm going to blame it on. I said, got enough mics on your drums?
Get out of here.
And he was like, what do you mean? And I went, it's kind of a lot of mics. It's like a lot of mics. That's all I'm saying. No offense. That's a lot of mics. He didn't see the humor in it at all.
No, I don't.
But down at the end were the 2-inch tape boxes, and that was crazy to see because it was just like, you know,
Walls.
oh man,
Yeah.
like hundreds of boxes of 2-inch tape, you know. So you could only imagine what was on those reels. I mean, it was like had to equate to hundreds of hours of music. And anyhow, so Eddie was, if you know, you can look up the interview if you don't have it, or if you haven't read it, or it's been a lot of years. It's actually pretty easy to find on the internet, and you can read Billy's interview with Eddie. And it was an interesting time for Eddie because he was sober then. I don't know. You guys probably know better than me for how long he'd been sober. Around 95. I don't think it was that long.
It's 94, 95.
It was when he became sober.
Yes.
Okay. Um, but he was, you know, I mean, I don't want to feel like I'm telling tales out of school or anything, but I mean, he was sober and he talked about being sober, but he did have this glass that was like the size of a vase, and he would open two O'Douls and fill the thing and drink it in one sip.
Wow.
And then he did that about 10 times,
Wow.
like while we were there.
Yeah.
So, I guess what part of what I'm trying to say is that, he was very nice. He was very emotional in talking about different parts of his life, like way too sort of candid in a way at times. And, but at the same time, like he had a very acerbic sense of humor. Like he picked on Billy a bunch of times, but just as a joke.
Right.
Like he would say like, "Oh, I can't." He would say like, "Oh, it's probably too cold in here for you. You're such a wimp," or something like that.
Right.
But he meant it like a joke,
Yeah.
like
What?
me making fun of the mic, like you have enough mics and you're drunk, like. But yeah, Eddie was a very intense person, and it was this weird mix of someone that was really intense, but also really could tell a really sensitive person. And he seemed like he was, I don't know, like he was a very unbalanced kind of a person. Like the music part was times a million what would be like a normal good musician. Like he would be sitting in a chair with a solid body guitar not plugged in, noodling, not paying any attention to what he was playing, just talking. And what was coming off the guitar like might as well have been plugged into a Marshall, because it was just the amount of sound and the touch and the tone and everything, like you could hear it all. Like it was like him breathing. It was just the only other person I've ever been around where it was like that was Stevie Ray Vaughan, where the amount of sound that would come off a solid body guitar and not plugged in was so loud it was unbelievable, and the guy's not even paying attention.
Right. Well, I wanted to have you on anyway because you're it's such a nice guy, and you've done so much. But 5150 for anybody who picked up I don't even think you have to be a guitar player. I mean, this is like hallowed ground, right? It's like, and you've got Elvis and Graceland, you've got Prince, and Paisley Park, and then you've got 50. I mean, that's why Caleb was sneaking on the lot apparently, because everybody wants to see it. You
Yeah.
hear about it. I still have on.
For the record, I never snuck on the property. Just want to put that out there.
I still have on VHS tape, which of course I haven't had a VHS player in years, so I don't know why I've kept it. But remember when they did the special on MTV, and then they did the two tunes at the end, like because you just wanted to see what is it like, what does it look like, what's it in, because it's this fabled ground, and so it's so cool that you got to go
Well,
and see
the control room was not very deep in the sense of, the board was huge, but like the glass was right there. Under the glass were all his guitars, but it wasn't. I mean, there was like maybe it's hard to remember exactly, but it might have
Like
only
8
been
feet. It's like 8 feet. Yeah.
at the most. I was going
Yeah.
to say 6
From the
feet.
window to the back wall, it's nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's a very tight little space. He put on. He said, "This is a song." I mean, like part of Eddie's sense of humor was that he would rag on Sammy like crazy, but it was like needling.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like it wasn't mean, but it. I guess everybody complains about their singer or something.
Oh yeah.
You know what I
Lead,
mean?
lead singer disease, right? That's what they call it.
Mhm.
LSD.
Well, that's
Yeah.
if the guy has an attitude, but he
Yeah.
would say, well, in this particular instance, he said, he goes, I have this travel. He sounded sort of whatever the word is, exasperated about it. He said, "Oh, I have this track, and I'm trying to get Sammy to come here and sing on it forever, you know." And then he played it for us, and he literally went like this with the faders on the board. And I'm not. It had to be like 140 decibels or something.
Yeah.
Like it was not really safe
For you to be.
volume level.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like it was kind of nuts.
Yeah.
Like you could tell myself, like everybody was sort of like, maybe I should run. Like this is really, 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 really loud.
And Brad's going, yep, because he was on the 1984 tour,
I mean, your
and he
ear,
knows that that's the loudest tour in history. So
Yeah.
yeah, and but the song was crossing over,
Okay.
and it didn't have a vocal on it yet, and he was wanted to play it for us because he was so into the song, and so I remembered that for a long time. You know, he said the name of the song, talked about the person that he wrote it about, you know what the whole thing was about, and so uh, you know, in the final analysis, my impressions of him, he was very warm, he was very sweet, he was funny, and he was nice, but you know, you could tell like he was. He seemed like in some ways. I don't want to say something that fans or people might take the wrong way, but he seemed kind of tortured by certain aspects of his life. For example, he said he never went out. He would not go out. And we would say, well, you know, go down to the bottom of the street, you know, there's Sunset. You know, you could go to the Rainbow, you know, or the Roxy, you know, it's like 5 minutes from his house. And he's like, no, 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 like I could never do that. I could never do that. And um, I mean, I know he was super, super famous, so it would probably be difficult for him to go out.
Right.
But, you know, one of the things, just speaking for myself, like over all of these years, I've gotten to know a variety of people who became extremely famous. And everybody's different, it affects them different ways. But, you know, so the other end of the spectrum is somebody like Keith Richards, who lived in New York, and his whole thing was, you know, if I make it like it's no big deal for people to see me on the street or in a bar, in a restaurant, or anywhere, then it will stop being a big deal like almost immediately. And it's but that's Keith. That worked for Keith. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Keith would
Well,
come out of his building, walk down West Fourth Street, and he'd say hi to the garbage man. You know, hey Keith, what's up?
right.
And that's how he was able to be happy and live his life. Eddie seemed a little bit like, you know, his fame and success in the life that he was living had him sort of trapped up on that hill, and it didn't seem like he felt he had the freedom to go sort of live in a more normal way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, and obviously, this is all secondhand, but in some ways, you know, I think coming from another country and having to learn the language, he always seemed like he loved, like you said, he loves to play, he loves to perform and all that stuff. But I don't think he wanted the fame side of it at all. He seemed like he was still that shy kid. Am I reading that right, Brad and Caleb?
yeah, if you read Noel Monk's book, there's a great story in there where it's 1978 and they're in Paris and they're on the Black Sabbath tour, and there's a knock on Noel's door, and it's Eddie, and he's crying, and brings him into the room, and they'd been on the road for a couple of months in Europe, and they were blowing those guys off the stage, and the followings were picking up in Europe big time,
Right.
and the record was selling back home, and um, Noel describes it as he had a complete nervous breakdown about the impending fame that was coming, the superstardom that he felt that was coming upon him, and he wanted to quit. He wanted to go home. He wanted it to stop. He wanted literally to quit everything that night. And
Wow.
Noel says he laid it out for him, like in certain terms, like, do you want your parents to have a new house? Do you want your dad to have a boat? Because they'd been talking about stuff like that. Do you want the things that you want, that I know you want? And he looked at him and he said, because you're that close. It's around the corner. You're there. It's happening. Do you want those things for your life? And it was a way that he kind of accepted that, was that, like, you are so close to getting to the top of the mountain. How could you stop now?
Right.
But it had a lot to do with Dave, because he knew he was going to be stuck to Dave for a long time, and I
Yeah.
don't think he wanted that.
Well, I could
Because
tell you
Dave,
that.
yeah, Dave made him feel like
Well,
he was just the help.
well, I could tell you what he's.
So,
I mean, this was in '96, so Dave had been gone for 10 years,
hmm
and he was talking about stuff like it happened yesterday, like he was that upset about it.
oh yeah,
Things between him and Dave,
oh, his memory is ridiculous too. So,
and so on a certain level, just meeting him, like like we're all meeting him for the first time, and hanging out with him in his studio for the first time, and he's telling stories about specific things Dave said to him, like on a given night 10 years ago,
hmm
that he's still so upset about. And I mean, he has every right. These are his feelings. But at the same time, I'm thinking, like, dude, this is 10 years ago. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you went your way. Dave went his way. Like, you're adults. Like, okay. Like, he may have said some fucked up things to you 10 years ago. That's 10 years ago. Like, he was a very I believe he was a very, very sensitive person, and it was not like he was going to be able to just forgive Dave or even say, like, that it was ever okay for some of those things that happened between them. Like, like, you know what I mean? It was like
Right.
something that could never be resolved.
Yeah.
well,
Like,
he was
Dave
bullied.
was fucked up and he was mean to me and he didn't like that I got the attention. He goes, and I didn't want the attention.
Right.
I didn't want it.
Yeah.
He could have all the attention. I wasn't trying to do any. I was just. He goes, "What was I trying to do?" It's funny that we're talking about it. I'm making me remember these things. He said, he goes, you know what he was mad at me for? Because I was playing guitar good
Yeah.
and I was like writing songs. That's what he was mad at me for.
Yeah. So Brad, I want to get you in on this too. So you spent an entire tour. What was your feeling about the dynamic? I know when we talked offline before, that you used to spend some time, and that was the tour right after he'd been married to Valerie Bertinelli for what, 2 years at that point, something like that. So he was actually trying to be a good boy and staying in his hotel room after the show. So tell us a little bit about that and your experiences.
Yeah. So he was writing the soundtrack to the sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's called The Wildlife with Sean Penn, Sean Penn's younger brother.
Chris Penn, yeah.
Chris, yeah. And the movie panned, but the soundtrack is just killer. So, after a show, we'd get, Eddie, to the car and, out of the car into the, when there wasn't a freight elevator. And, we stayed at a lot of Holiday Inns, Omaha, Nebraska. It's not like the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago where you can sneak through the kitchen.
Right.
So it was tough sometimes. And yeah, I will tell you, Eddie didn't like that stuff. But you're right. He's very sensitive. Um, you know, I was 23 years old, and he really took me under his wing. You know, and you know, Andy's right. When he would share, like when he hugged you, you know, it was never a you know, just a polite touch and go. You know, I mean, he would take his hands and put them on your face. You know, and check on you, and like he was really intense. You know, his dad was that way, very affectionate.
Oh, really?
They were always hugging. You know, like they'd walk down a hallway just arm in arm, seriously embraced. But you know, so Eddie's recording this. He has his little Steinberger guitar,
Mhm.
a Rockman with a headset, headphones, and then the Rockman went into a little 4-track like Tascam cassette deck, you know, with which had another headset on it. So just often after shows, you know, when there wasn't much going on, you know, I just check in on, hey, he's like, hey, come on in, come in, man, you know, and it was really one of the highlights of my careers to just sit, especially early on in that tour, because um, as I was telling you, James, you know, growing up, high school for me was Jackson Brown and Linda Ronstadt and you know, James Taylor and George Benson. You know, Russ Kunkel, the drummer for Jackson, was just my hero. You know, so I went to PIT, um, and there was this new guy in my class after Christmas who had a Diver Down tour jacket on. He said, Ron. I was like, hey, Ron, nice jacket. He's like, hey, F you, man. You want to go to I said, yeah, I'll go to a party. And it was Alex Van Halen's bachelor party on this 60-foot yacht off of Santa Monica
Nice.
with the whole crew, you know, Noel Monk, Harvey Shaps, midgets, strippers, and the band. And I just hit it off with the management, you know, and got invited down to the offices that next week. So anyway, long story short, just that story about Eddie writing was so cool because it was just all about the music for him, you know. So he would travel with a little leather case full of cassettes, just full of ideas, you know, bottle of Stoli, cigarettes,
Right.
an occasional Whopper, and which I would get him, or you know, whatever, and just to watch him perform. And you're right, Andy. You know, I'll never forget early on in the tour, and somebody else was in the hotel room, and I had the headset on. So I'm still listening to him. He's talking to this other guy about how you take a leak on the space shuttle. And riffing, he's what he's doing, what I'm listening to. And he's talking about something, you know, it was just unbelievable. I mean, I became a fan well, I mean, the US Festival was my first gig with them, and
Wow.
I was a drummer, so I was standing behind Alex, you know, at the US Festival. Just it was amazing,
Wow.
unbelievable. So I got
That's
tons of stories.
that's like the Halcyon 300,000 people. Is that the one, Brad, where they pretended that they had jumped into the stadium? They had parachuters dressed as Van Halen, and then they came on. Is that the same one?
That was in 1978 when they
Okay.
played Anaheim Stadium and they opened for Boston, and actually Sammy Hagar opened for them.
Right.
But yeah, they had some stunt guys jump out and then jump in a van, and they were in the van already.
Yeah,
so,
to run out of the van. Yeah.
Yeah. So
God, I miss rock and roll. Do you guys not? I mean, rock and roll
Yeah.
shows,
Yeah,
man.
but
they're
Eddie
just-
talked about how much he hated every aspect of that because it was fake. I mean, I liked, you know, I remember it might have been his first or his second guitar player interview, and like at least this is the way it is in my memory. One of the first things he said is, "Well, you know, they made me lie about my age.
mhm.
You know, this is my real age." Like it's
Yeah.
like, you know, I was born in '54. You know, like I wasn't born in '57. You know, I'm 3 years older than they want everybody to believe because they wanted me to be 21, and it was just
Yeah.
sort of funny. It was like right away. It was like, you know, but you know the hug thing. Uh, there, I think whatever this is, not that you could put it into words, you know, but like whatever it was that made him play the way he played, or made music as important to him as it was, or made the instrument, you know, allow him to speak and communicate in a way that he wasn't, you know, in any other way.
Yeah.
Steve Ray Vaughan, it was the same thing. Very sensitive person who had trouble finding the right words for things. So it was the natural thing for him to do, to channel everything into the guitar, because then he could talk to the world through his guitar, and he
Yeah,
did.
absolutely.
And there
That's
was
why we're here right now.
But there was
Yeah.
no bullshit with Stevie ever, and it seemed like Eddie was
Same way.
similar in that way. Like when he
Totally agree.
talked, I know I spent a bunch of time with Stevie, so I have a better, I could, you know, have real more experiences to draw on from that. But you know, when Stevie would talk to you, it was like he would look at you like when he's being serious. Um, I mean, he had no tolerance for bullshit of any kind, like none. Like it would be like almost an affront to mankind, you know, to be a false person in any sort of a way.
Yeah.
And when he hugged you, like he would crush your spine, you know, like
Right.
it wasn't like he would just come over and like give you a hug.
Yeah.
When Stevie hugged you, like he would squeeze all the wind out of you. Like I have on a recording where I go to say goodbye to him, and the tape's still rolling, and I'm in the middle of a sentence when he hugged me, and I couldn't talk. Yeah.
That's
And
great.
and and from I had one experience with Eddie, you know, where I was there for that day, but he seemed very similar. You know, Stevie had been gone by that point for 6 years, so you know, Eddie seemed to be similar in that way, in that it was almost like, you know, not only would he not want to pretend or be a bullshit person, but that he was like sort of unable to do it. You know,
Yeah.
like
Right.
it
Well, I want to make sure we get Caleb in here too, because Caleb, thanks so much. Usually Twitter kind of annoys me, but I loved that somebody said, "Oh, that must have been the highlight of your life when you sat, at the Met with the Frankenstein." You're like, "Oh, this," and then you had a picture of you and Ed. So let's hear about your experiences with Ed, man.
Well, it started when I was very young. I was 13 years old and I was getting into rock and roll. Probably the fall of '82. I was hardcore into the Rolling Stones because they'd had that big tour in '81, and we saw the pay-per-view at the end of the tour, and I just would watch it endlessly over and over again. I thought Mick Jagger was the most dynamic performer I'd ever seen at that point. And then the Who the next year, I went to that show. I ditched school as a 13-year-old with some friends in my 7th grade class. We went to the LA Coliseum, general admission, and didn't tell my parents until like it was the afternoon. And I said, "Mom, I'm at the show here. I'm going in. Don't come down here until I call you at 11 o'clock or whatever." And
That's about right. Yeah.
I don't care how much in trouble I am. And I saw the Who play with the Clash. Changed my life. I knew I wanted to play an instrument, so I got an acoustic guitar, took some lessons, lost interest, couldn't break through the barrier of that. There's an atmosphere you have to break through with an acoustic, and I just wasn't feeling it. And then so that was November of '82, and then around March of '83 I was getting into Van Halen. The Diver Down record was big, and Little Guitars and Pretty Woman were big songs, and I traded a Kinks record for the first 2 records with a friend. He had these old versions of like just warped and scratched versions of Van Halen 1 and 2. And I listened to them and I really wasn't catching what was going on, what he was doing. I knew people considered him the best, but I didn't really know why. And, in Southern California, my dad was a screenwriter and we had some friends in the business, and we had a good friend who was the assistant director on One Day at a Time. And we would go to the tapings, and so this one taping in March of '83 was the final episode of the season, and they call it a rap party. And we went to go sit in the studio audience, and I got bored real fast, and I got up and took a walk, and I ended up walking around to the back of the set, and I saw the kid on the show, Glenn Scarpelli, back there, and he saw me and was like, "Oh my God, a kid," because he was
Right.
around adults all day.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but I wrote this. This is the thing I wrote like a few days after Ed passed, about how it all started for me, and I'll share it with you guys later. And if you guys want to read it, it's on the Nerd Halen Facebook page. But I went in there to their green room, which is behind the set, and I saw all the directors' chairs with all the actors' names on them. And then I saw the name Eddie on a chair that was written in tape. And I said, "Is he going to be here?" And Glenn said, "Who, Eddie? Yeah, you want to meet him?" And lo and behold, Alex and Eddie, and I think Alex's fiance, maybe the one from the boat, walk in and sit down right there with me. And I was just a kid back there. I was the only person from the front of the house to come back, and sitting with the Van Halens and the actors on the show
Cool.
while they're doing the show. And it's like a 3-hour taping. It takes them forever to shoot a 22-minute episode, but the whole night went on, and all I did was ask, dumb questions and good questions. And, I'm 13, and the whole time, all I noticed was how Eddie was so engaged with me, and made me feel like a person that he was interested in. He would ask me like where I was from, what part of town, did I play sports, where I went to school, what do I want to do when I grow up, am I into music, what kind of music, all that stuff was coming at me, from him. And Alex was there telling dirty jokes to a 13-year-old, which was
That
funny
seems
too,
about
so.
right. Right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it became like the most memorable night of my life, because when you meet someone like that, and they look you in the eye when you're talking to them, and they shake your hand with a grip, like I'll never forget meeting him and shaking his hand, and he's looking into my eye. That's what I noticed right away. And it was kind of like Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio never took a night off. And he famously said, like, I know, because if I take a night off, there's a kid out there who wanted to see me.
Right.
And they wanted to get the full Joe DiMaggio. And I think wherever Eddie went, he wanted to leave that impression, especially with young people, that he was, young once too, and had heroes and stuff like that. And it, I left that night, and I had an electric guitar within a couple of weeks, and I stayed in my room for the rest of my teens, and all of it. So it all just happened, and I started my chase of Eddie Van Halen that night, and would meet him again a few times along the road, and have closure and all that stuff, because I was literally like obsessed after that moment, because
Right.
I went home and I listened to those records.
So for people that are watching or listening to this, so Caleb has a band called Nerd Halen out of California, it's spectacular.
Thank you.
You guys are great. I mean, it's hard to pull that off, and you guys do it with some whimsy. You do it with both whimsy, and you also kick ass. So that's a great combination.
Well, that was the plan. I knew I wasn't going to be able to, put on the wig and the tights and
No.
and do the Eddie. It would have been like Howard Stern. I'm 6'4", so it would have looked very awkward. So I had to come up with a gimmick, and the gimmick I wanted to come up with was, I wanted to lower the expectation of the music by having us look a certain way. So the Nerd Halen thing evolved. There's some other bands that dress like nerds and play music, and that's fine. And I'm not trying to lift their idea, because I don't think it's their idea. I think they lifted it from the, Revenge of the Nerds, where there's a band at the end. So,
right.
But
so did he know, Caleb, that you guys were doing this? Was he aware of you guys?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was able to tell Alex about it. So, and he loved the idea himself. So, yeah, I wanted to completely lower the expectation, and then the music would be spot on. And that's kind of where I think we're going, and where we're at, especially with how my playing's evolved, and you know, I always wanted to copy his feel. I never wanted to note the note for note. You know, I wanted to get that feel that he had, and the idea came, and I finally put the band together, and you know, I started selling T-shirts before there was even a band. It was just me, but I started just pushing this idea uphill, and it started to catch fire, and you know, I was able to land a celebrity singer in Hal Sparks, and he plays the perfect part. It's almost like he's Waldo grown up
Yeah.
from the Hot for Teacher video. It's kind of the where we kind of created the theme, and I'm
Well, you
just
know what?
I'm having a blast, and you know, even I was able to get an artist relationship with EVH Gear at the beginning of the year. And for
Cool.
me, that's like the greatest thing that's ever happened in my
That's
musical
cool.
life, because I feel like I finally caught him at
Right.
that moment. You know what I mean? Like I finally caught him, and I know that for a fact that he knew about the project and thought it was a good idea, and obviously Matt Bruck knew about it. Matt's, you know, had a lot to do with me coming aboard with EVH, and it's an honor. It's an
Yeah.
honor to be involved. I'm the only
Right.
tribute artist of the artist, you know, roster. There's only one tribute artist in that roster. So,
That's cool.
and there's a lot of great Van Halen tributes.
Yeah, there
so,
is.
you know, a lot of great players, a lot of good people doing this, and so for me, it's you know, and we were on such a nice little trajectory there until
Right.
the madness, and so yeah,
COVID's been
that's
terrible. Yeah.
yeah, but for me, it took a long time for me to get to this point, because music never really worked out for me after all those years. It just kind of was like I became an actor and tried that, and did, you know, odd jobs, a lot of fail, and finally was able to come up with something that I could, you know, put my own passion into, which is the secret, by the way, out there.
Yeah.
Do what you really love doing, because nobody else is going to do that harder than you.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the truth. You know what I mean? So
Right
Yeah.
on.
So two quick things on that. Well, first, if you hate any of the guitarists they send you, Caleb,
Mhm.
shoot them over my way.
Oh yeah, they've only sent me one,
Well,
and
okay.
and it's fantastic. These
Pretty good.
I'm all for
new
recycling.
replicas are fantastic. I was afraid it was going to not be that good, and because then I would have to play a guitar that I wasn't fond of, because I have other guitars that I've built that are incredible. But this thing that they put out this year, and I almost think it's like a gift from Eddie. Everybody who's touched this guitar feels something very special in the neck, and just the way it feels. And obviously, when you look down at this and see what you're playing, you feel like you're playing the one.
Right.
And there's a psychological thing that goes into that. So
That's cool.
Well, I would.
Kudos.
I hate to say this, but I have to go.
No, I appreciate. I know you're on the East
But,
Coast, and
it's really great to meet all you guys, and it's been a lot of fun to talk. And so you know, Eddie's been a wonderfully inspirational person for so many people over so many generations. He's going to continue to be. You know, he was only about 2 years older than me, like not even like a full 2 years older than me, so we were real close in age. And you know, so I feel lucky that I got to meet him and spend some time with him, get a feeling for him as a person, you know.
absolutely.
And he was, when you know, in my experience with him was a very memorable, nice experience, you know. So I'm sorry I have to go.
No,
but
it's late, and Andy, thanks so much for doing it. And I'm saying you've been on my podcast twice, Andy. So you want barbecue sauce from Kansas City?
I do.
You want anything?
I do.
You let me know. I'll hook you up.
I do too.
I have to come on again for that, or
No, we'll send you barbecue sauce. I got a lot
Thanks,
of free
Andy.
time in 2020. Thanks so much,
Thanks.
Andy. Have a great
Thanks,
night.
guys. All right.
Okay, see you,
So
bud.
as
Thank you, everybody.
if he drops off, I just wanted to say real quick before we go, because you know I'm sure we could sit and talk hours. But one of the things there's two things I think about Van Halen that I think all of us will get, but some people, they were so much fun, man. You know, you'd go to a Van Halen concert and you could not have a great time. It was fun, and there's so much there's so many acts they take it too seriously and stuff.
they all do, by the way.
Yeah.
Every act takes themselves seriously, and Van
Yeah.
Halen was the only one that appeared like they didn't take it serious. They took it seriously.
Yeah. The music.
The appearance
Yeah.
was, this is fun. We're having fun. We're forgetting the fucking words. You know, like it's a
Yeah.
good time, and that's something they brought to rock and roll that nobody else did, and that was their, you know, aside from the sounds and the music and the melodies and all the things that we are still timeless today. That music is still as new to the ear as it is the day it was released, and that's why it's so special. It's almost like Beethoven and Mozart kind of a feeling. You're listening to music that's hundreds of years old in that case.
So
The same
Brad,
thing with Van Halen. Go ahead.
right? I was just gonna say, well, Brad, you can't probably tell any X-rated stories. We want to be, you know,
Oh,
kind
I want to hear all about
So
1984.
just tell us, like, just give us an idea how crazy. Just give me like one, you know, so nobody sues me. You know, not that bad, but just like give me a little flavor. What was it like?
Well, just real quick about the music, no matter how tired I was, or anybody, the whole crew or the band, or wasted, or just exhausted, or, just when those 16 spotlights hit Eddie for Unchained, for that,
Mhm.
you know,
It was go time.
it was just, and
Yeah.
and then Dave does the splits,
There you go.
it was, I mean, I just got a rush right now,
Right.
So you're right. And every time I hear that song at a sporting event or something, I stand up and just salute,
Right.
For me, it was, I love.
Oh, you must have a D-tuna on your guitar. You just went down to. Yeah. That's all we can play, folks.
Yeah. Okay, so
Do we get
here's
flagged?
here's the first moment out of the cars, arriving in Jacksonville for the first show of the 1984 tour. And there's drinks, at the airport, on the plane, in the limo, pulling up to this, I think it was a Hilton on the river there in Jacksonville. And we pull up, and I look over the window by the front door, and there's two young bellhops with their luggage carts,
Mhm.
like excited to greet us, with some management there. And Alex is on a roll, and we all get out, and Dave's, being Dave. Alex grabs one of these young bellhops, pulls out some duct tapes him to his luggage cart, pulls out some lighter fluid, squirts it on his shoes, lights his shoes on fire, takes a couple $100 bills, put it in the kid's mouth, to a fountain.
He rolled him into a fountain.
What's that?
He rolled him into a fountain.
Rolled him into the fountain. And of course, for the next, 14 months, I followed these guys and put out these fires, right? Pulled the kid out
Wow.
of the mountain, and he was just laughing. It was just the thrill of his life. And nobody had cell phones back then.
No, you could get away with a lot more back then.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
how it began,
Wow.
that's how it started. And, we were talking about fame, and I got to tell this one story because it still wakes me up occasionally. But we're in Hartford, Connecticut, and that's where we shot Jump in Panama. In fact,
Mhm.
in the Panama video, in the party scene,
Are you?
where everybody raises a cup back there. But that was a blast. But then Valerie was coming in that afternoon. Like she would come out for a week at a time
Mhm.
on the tour. So I went to the airport, or I got a quick tour, because in Hartford, the hotel was attached to a shopping mall attached to the arena. And I got a tour that afternoon real quick, because everything was just crazy that day, about how to go down through the kitchen, freight elevator, up to the backstage. So I'm like, yeah, I got it. I had to get out to the airport. For some reason, Harvey wanted me to go with the car to get Valerie, or Eddie might have. Anyway, Valerie and I get back. It's kind of late. It's like 6:30, and I think Eddie had missed sound check, which he didn't like. I mean, he would spend 45 minutes to an hour placing that microphone.
Mm-hmm.
on stage, or the two, but or one, it was just
Right.
a master
He'd
craft.
go out in the house and have the guy just move it a hair, move it a hair,
Yeah.
move it a hair,
Yeah.
and he'd be listening to the mains and just it had to be.
Oh, and when he wasn't happy, he'd have Don Landee, flown out,
Mm-hmm.
and Ken Campbell, and they'd go to work on his amp heads, and just constant. So anyway, we get back, and I'm just like, Valerie, they embrace real quick, door closes. I'm like, guys, we gotta go, just whenever you're ready. So they come out, and I'm like, all right, let's go. And we get in the elevator, and I'm like, oh yeah, I think basement, yeah, down, Anyway, we get out kind of through there's like uniforms for staff in the halls of this hotel. And we come up to these brown doors, and I'm like, yeah, I think these look familiar. And I bang open the door, and it's the wrong door. It's the entrance for the 15,000 kids, coming into the Coliseum.
Oh.
Wow.
And they step out in front of me, and I step out and close the door. Just as I realize we're in the hallway, and everybody freaks out.
In the concourse.
Immediately, they just swarm around us,
Wow.
and there's no handle on the door. So, and Eddie's like, Brad, what the fuck, and I'm like, and I'm waving over, to security. Some security come over. They get us, and they're like pulling Eddie's hair, and Valerie's cowering, and Eddie's starting to sign a couple autographs, and he's getting pissed. And anyway, we get back into the elevator. Security helps us into the elevator, and it's just really intense. And Valerie's like, "Why did you start to sign?" And he's like, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And he's like, "Aces, Brad." I'll never forget that. He says, "Aces" to me, Thanks a lot, man. And I'm like, I am so sorry. And Valerie's just cowering in his arms. And she goes, I just wish one night, we could be normal. And the doors closed, and the elevator moved. And that's all I remember, but
Wow.
it was just intense, It's like fame is this thing you think is just so great, man, but it can become so entrapped,
Yeah. It'd be kind of miserable in a way. I mean,
I think you miss being regular real fast. When everywhere you go, people are like, it's just that vibe is like, oh God.
and I think most fans are kind of like we are, guys, where it's a loving thing, and it's if he came close to me and said, but I most likely would leave him alone when he was alive, and I wouldn't want to be. Boy, there's some real weird people, and I really feel bad for Wolfgang right now because people were horrible to him and I was like, I don't think people get that he probably would not have done those last tours without his kid. One, because I think he wanted to play with his son so much, right?
Right.
And the other thing is all the great tunes they played on those last two tours. Drop Dead Legs is one of my favorite Van Halen songs ever. The fact that I got to hear that live, I'd been wanting to hear that live for 30 something years. And these Nasty Rumors, right? So
Caleb.
It'd be you're gonna give us an outro, but it'd be hard. So anyway, but what a great band. Like I said, I wanted this to be a celebration. I wanted this to be happy. I know we're all sad. It's a sad way, but we all were lucky enough. Somebody had a meme up and said, the earth is 4.5 billion years old.
Yeah.
And you got to be alive when Van Halen was. And I was like, that's a good way to put it. We were very lucky to see it and experience it and be a part of it. So I wanted to have you guys on. It's a joy. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and be sure to check everybody out. I'll put on the links where everybody can check out stuff. Caleb, I'll put your website up there, and Brad, thank you so much for everything.
Pleasure.
And Caleb, you pick, brother. What do you want to play for the out? Whatever your favorite Van Halen riff. There's so many to choose from, though. Give me one.
Well, I'm in drop D, so
I guess we're playing Unchained.
get them from here. I don't care where I'm going. It's just good for you. And then
All right, fellas.
thanks, James.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you so much for making time. Caleb, thank you so much. Caleb, when COVID's
Thanks,
over,
Caleb.
I'm coming out to California. I'm going to a Nerd Halen show. You fellas be safe, all right?
Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks so much. Have a good
Thanks
night,
so
guys.
much. Have a
All
great
right.
night.
Bye-bye.